Paying your credit card bill doesn't have to be complicated, but if you clicked on this video, you're most likely like me and want to maximize your credit score in every way you can, and that includes as to when to pay your credit card bill. So if that's you, you're in the right place. But before we talk about when to pay your credit card bill to increase your credit score, we first need to look at a credit card statement and actually understand that, since everybody's going to be slightly different. That way we're all on the same page. So let's go ahead and take a look here at one of my Chase Freedom Unlimited credit card statements, and we're going to break this down step by step so we can see exactly what is going into one of these. But first, it's important to explain what a credit card statement is, and basically all it does is tell you everything about your credit card that happened within a statement or a billing cycle, which is usually a 30-day period in which you make purchases and make payments. Everything is summarized into your statement at the end of the month. So one of the most important things we're going to want to cover first is actually when this statement opened and when it closed. And to find that, you're going to go ahead and look down here at the opening/closing date. That's going to tell you right here that this statement opened for me on March 18th, 2022 and closed on May 4th of 2022. Now, as I just mentioned, usually these credit card statements are for a 30-day period, but for me, this one's gonna be a lot longer because I actually requested to have my due date change, which we'll cover more in depth later, but I just wanted to tell you all that up front so you weren't confused as to why mine was more than 30 days. So this statement open date, the March 18th, 2022, was when all of my purchases and payments and everything like that were starting to be tracked. And that is for this statement specifically. The statement close date, which was May 4th for me, tells you when exactly the credit card lenders report all of your statements, your credit utilization, and everything like that to the credit bureaus. And we're also going to talk about how much utilization you're going to want to report to the credit bureaus later in the video, so stick around for that. Now let's go ahead and move to the top of the statement where you can see my payment due date. And as I just mentioned, I actually did request a change to my payment due date to make it on the 1st of every month, because it did used to be another arbitrary date within the month, and that's probably the case for you. Now, the only reason that I actually changed my due date to be on the 1st is because I want all of my cards to land on the same day, but whenever you go to apply for a new card, they generally just give you a date corresponding to when you actually applied for the card, and not necessarily one that you pick. So in order to get that changed, all you have to do is either call up the credit card company, or you can usually submit an online form, which is what I did here with Chase. And that is also why, as I talked about earlier, my open and closing date are more than 30 days apart. But let's go more in depth on the payment due date. And really all this date tells you is that this is the day when at least the minimum payment for your credit card is due if you want to avoid any late fees. Now that we know what that date means, we need to actually talk about what balances are due on that date. So let's go ahead and look at right above that, and we'll see our new balance here, which is $95.14 for me, and the minimum payment due, which is $40. So the new balance is the main balance that we need to be focusing on, because that is our statement balance. Now, the easiest way I've learned to think about a statement balance actually came from Daniel Braun, who's another great YouTuber on this space, is to think about the statement balance as a snapshot of time, that 30-day period in which you're able to make your purchases. And this statement balance, which is $95.14 for me, would include all of the purchases that I made, any fees that I might have accrued, or any interest charges that I might have to pay. Now under that, we can see the minimum payment due, which is $40 here. Now this minimum payment due is the absolute minimum that you have to pay on your payment due date. And the way that this number is calculated is it's either 1 to 2% of your statement balance, or it's a $25 to $45 charge, whichever one of those numbers turns out to be higher. So in this case, $40 was the higher number, and that's what's my minimum payment. Now I do want to mention that if you were to only make the minimum payment every single month, you'd still be accruing interest on that remaining statement balance that you didn't pay. So that $95.14 minus $40 for me would be $55.14 that I would be accruing interest on month over month until I paid that off. So don't just think if you pay the minimum payment that you'll never accrue interest and you'll be perfectly fine. You actually need to pay the statement balance off every month if you want to avoid any problems with interest. Now for those of you who are curious, there is one other balance that shows up in your credit card apps if you were to look at that, and that would be the current balance. So rather than that snapshot of time that I was talking about to think of the statement balance as, the current balance is really just a running total of your actual balance on the account. That's the easiest way for me to think about it. So the current balance will include the statement balance plus any purchases that you made after that statement close date that we talked about up until today. So I'm gonna give you all a quick little example on this calendar here on my statement. Let's say that my statement closed on the 29th, but my payment due date wasn't until the 19th. That means that I could have been making purchases all throughout these days in between, and those wouldn't be reflected on this statement balance, but it would be reflected in my current balance, which would then be captured in my next month's statement balance. And yes, I know this can get confusing because I've been throwing out a lot of different terms at you, but if you are a little bit confused, maybe just hit rewind a few times to see that part again, to see what the difference is between the minimum, statement, and current balances. Okay, so now that we talked about that, let's go ahead and go down to our account summary and kind of understand what happened within this statement. So the first thing that you're gonna see here is the previous balance. Now this is the balance from my previous billing cycle that needed to be paid off. So underneath that, you can see the payments and credits line, line, and that's going to basically tell you all the different payments or credits you might have made to your account during that billing cycle. So for me, the reason this number is super high here compared to this 324 that was the previous that I just needed to pay off is because I like to make early payments to my accounts. But if you don't make early payments to your accounts, then this number would very likely look like negative 324 to match exactly the previous balance that you had to pay off this month. And that's completely fine. So now you may be sitting there thinking, okay, well, why do you make early payments? Like, what's the benefit of that? And to illustrate this, let's go ahead and continue down this statement more. And you can see this purchases line in which I made $382.31 of purchases. So it is completely fine to make as many purchases as you want on your card within a billing cycle. But for me, that $382.31 was going to bring my utilization to a point above where I like to keep mine. So what I do is during my billing cycle, I'll make early payments before my statement close date. That way I can bring my utilization down and report a better number to the credit bureaus. So I could have very easily left this as $382.31 rolling over into my next statement in which I would have to pay off that month. But since my credit limit on this card is only $4,000, if I was to leave that $382.31 on my card for the next month, my credit utilization for that period would be about 10%. Now that isn't a bad credit utilization at all, that's actually really good, but I like to keep mine about 1 to 2% because I found that's the best way to increase your credit score. So what I did here is I made this early payment of $290.41 to bring my utilization down to that 1 to 2% that I like. So again, if you want to make early payments, make those before the statement close date. That way, what gets reported to the credit bureaus on that statement close date is a lower number than it would have been previously. So these are all of the main things that you're going to want to look at on your credit card statements. But hopefully through this exercise, you can see that all a statement really is telling you everything that happened with your credit card within a certain billing cycle from that open date to that close date. So now that we know what a statement is and what it covers, we can now actually talk about when we should pay our credit card bills off in order to increase our credit score the fastest and maximize it the most. Now this is where I get lost in a lot of videos on YouTube that I've watched in the past, but as I've used my credit cards and talked to other people that use their credit cards responsibly, there are really only two main options here that will actually help to increase your credit score, and they're not that complicated. Now the first option is going to be a little more time intensive than the second, and really all it's going to require you to do is look at your credit card bills more than once a month. So the first option is to make early payments to your card to bring your credit utilization down, as I just talked about, and then you can set up auto pay to pay your statement balance at or before the payment due date. If you were to implement this strategy, you would never have to worry about paying any interest, as you'd be paying at least the statement balance off every single month. Now, why would you want to do this? Why would you want to take the extra time to actually make early payments? And that's because credit utilization makes up 30% of your credit score, and it's recommended to keep that under 10%, and I try to keep mine, like I said, at 1 to 2% to find the best results. And a commonly asked question when it comes to this is, well, if you want your credit utilization to be super low, then why not pay everything off before the statement close date every single month to get your balance down to 0 to report a 0% credit utilization? Now this is what I used to do because I thought this was what made the most sense, but I found out that there are a few issues with this. First of all, if you report a 0% credit utilization, that tells lenders and the credit bureaus that you aren't actually using your card, so it makes your score really hard to calculate. On the same note, without any statement balances ever being reported, you would be at risk of having your card being closed for inactivity because, again, it doesn't look like you're using your card. And this actually might be the most important reason why this is not a good thing, is because you're actually not taking advantage of all the opportunities that you can to make on-time payments to increase your payment history. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If you don't report any credit utilization, that means you're not going to be paying off any statement balances every single month, since that's always going to be 0. So you're not building any on-time payment history since you're not making any payments. So in general, keeping your credit utilization at 1 to 2% shows the companies that you are using your cards, but that you're actually using them responsibly. Now that's the first option. The second option is to actually just let auto pay do its thing. So if you're somebody like my mom, for example, who doesn't like to stay super active in checking her credit card bills more than once a month, then I would just set up auto pay to pay your statement balance off after the statement close date and on or before your payment due date. If you do this, you'll never have to worry about late payments or accruing any interest because you're paying at least the statement balance off every single month and not just the minimum balance. Now the only catch to this is that you need to always make sure that you have enough money in your bank account that you're pulling from to pay the statement balance off every month. If that's the case, then you're all set here. That's the only thing you need to do. But hold on, there are some downsides to doing this option. The main and most obvious one is that you have no control over your credit utilization. So since you have little control over it, say you make a huge purchase in one month in particular, your credit utilization for that month is going to be super high, and if you were to go in and make early payments instead of just letting it pay off by itself, you could bring that utilization down before it gets reported. So let's go ahead and say, for example, that you have a credit card that has a $10,000 credit limit, and during a billing cycle, you put a $7,000 purchase on that credit card. If you were just to let that auto pay, your credit utilization is going to be 70%, which is obviously not great. But if you went ahead and made an early payment before that statement close date of say $6,000, then the remaining balance on that card would only be $1,000, and that would be a 10% credit utilization, which is much better to report to the credit bureaus. However, there is a counter argument to this, and if this is something that only happens very sparingly, then this shouldn't hurt your score in the long run. And the reason for this is because your credit utilization is reported once a month, so if one month it's really high, but the next month it's really low again, in reality it's going to kind of wash itself out, and over time your credit score is going to go back up to where it was before that high utilization was reported. And there are obviously some positives with this method, one being that you really never have to check your statement if you don't want to. This is a completely passive way to manage your credit cards, and it makes them more like a debit card that takes money from your account once a month instead of money from your account every single day like a debit card would. And for reference, my mom, who I just talked about, never makes early payments and her credit score is in the high 800s, so I think this is going to work out fine for you. So now what would happen if you don't do either of those things? First, let's say that you go ahead and only make the minimum payment. Now the good thing about this is that you won't be charged any late fees, but you will start to accrue interest on that remaining balance. Now this isn't ideal, but it's obviously better than paying nothing towards your credit card bill. So if that's all you're able to pay, then go ahead and at least try to make that minimum payment. If you find yourself in a position where you can't make the minimum payment, then not paying anything to your credit card bill at all is going to mean that you are charged a late fee of $20 to $40, and you're also going to be starting to accrue interest on that full balance that you didn't pay off, instead of the statement balance minus the minimum balance that we were talking about earlier. Also, the more and more months that pass without you making any payments towards that credit card bill will lead to a derogatory remark being added to your credit report. This could really hinder your ability to get approved for more credit cards down the line, but not to mention other loans like a home loan or a car loan or anything like that. And you also can't forget that the interest that you're going to be accumulating is going to be coming at 15 to 25% every single month. And with that interest, it's going to become a very large bill by the end of it if you aren't able to make payments to it every month. This is why I recommend that you do one of the first two options that I talked about. Now this is one way to increase your credit score, but if you're looking for other ways to rapidly increase it, go ahead and check out this video here. And if you're in the accumulating stage of the credit card game right now, then watch this video here to see how often you should be applying for credit cards to maximize your credit score and increase the odds of you being approved. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time.